The Ouija board has been sold as a toy since 1890, sitting on shelves next to board games in ordinary stores. But almost everyone who's actually used one has a story about the night it stopped feeling like a game. The word behind us. The first happened at a sleepover in suburban Ohio, where 3 teenage girls decided to try a Ouija board one of them had found in her grandmother's attic. They asked the usual questions, names, ages, nothing serious, and laughed off most of the answers as each other pushing the planchette. Then one of the girls, Casey, asked if anyone was watching them right now. The planchette moved to yes, and then, without anyone asking another question, it spelled out a single word: behind. All 3 girls turned around at once. The bedroom door, which they'd shut and locked before starting, was standing wide open, and the hallway light outside had been turned off, even though it was on when they'd gone in. Nobody in the house admitted to touching the door or the switch. They packed the board back into its box that night, and none of them have used one since. The name we didn't know yet. In a college dorm in upstate New York, a group of freshmen used a Ouija board just for fun on a Friday night, treating it like any other party game. Partway through, one of the boys, Marcus, asked jokingly if the spirit could tell them something about the future. The planchette spelled out a full name none of them recognized, followed by the word soon. They laughed it off and stopped playing shortly after. 3 weeks later, a new transfer student moved into their dorm, and when he introduced himself at a floor meeting, his name matched exactly what the board had spelled that night, first and last. Marcus says he's never brought it up to the guy directly, and he's never touched a Ouija board again. Check the basement. A family in rural Louisiana used a board that had belonged to the grandmother of the house, kept in a closet for decades before her granddaughter found it while cleaning. Curious, she and her husband decided to try it together one evening after their kids had gone to bed. They asked who they were speaking to, and the planchette spelled out the name of the grandmother's late husband, a man who had died nearly 30 years earlier. They asked if he had a message for them, and the planchette spelled out 3 words: check the basement. They didn't go down that night. The next morning, they found the basement door, which had a broken lock that never fully latched, standing wide open, and a single box that had sat undisturbed for years, pulled out into the middle of the floor. Inside were old photographs neither of them had ever seen, including one of the grandmother standing in front of the exact house they were now living in, dated years before she said she'd ever lived there. The man who wasn't invited. At a Halloween party in a rented house outside Chicago, a group of co-workers decided to use a Ouija board as a joke near midnight, mostly to make each other laugh. One woman, Priya, asked how many people were in the room. The correct number was 9. The planchette spelled out 10. Everyone laughed and assumed it was a mistake until someone did a head count and realized a man none of them recognized was standing quietly near the back of the room, not saying anything, not answering when spoken to. When someone walked over to ask who he was simply gone, and nobody at the party, including the host, could account for how he'd gotten in or out, since the only door was in clear view of the group the entire time. Alone at the kitchen table. The next story comes from a woman named Denise, who used a Ouija board alone, something almost everyone who's ever used one will tell you not to do. She'd just gone through a difficult divorce and, half out of curiosity and half out of loneliness, decided to try contacting her late father one night at her kitchen table. She asked simple questions first: his name, her mother's name, things only he would know, and the planchette answered correctly every time. Emboldened, she asked if he was proud of her. The planchette moved slowly to yes. Then, without her asking anything else, it began spelling out a string of letters that didn't form a word at all, just moving faster and faster in tight, jagged circles around the board, until the planchette flew off the table entirely and landed several feet away. Denise sat frozen at the table for a long moment before she noticed the kitchen faucet behind her had turned on by itself, running at full pressure into an empty sink. She said the strangest part wasn't the faucet or the flying planchette. It was that in the silence right after, she heard her own name said once, quietly, in a voice that sounded exactly like her father's, coming from somewhere behind her chair. She never used a board again, alone or otherwise, and she still keeps that kitchen faucet handle taped down to this day, just in case. Room 214, a group of night shift nurses at a small hospital in rural Michigan, kept a Ouija board in the break room, something that had been passed between staff for years as a way to kill time during slow overnight shifts. One night, a nurse named Beth asked the board if any patient on the floor was in danger. The planchette spelled out a room number, 214, a room that was supposed to be empty that night. Beth walked down to check anyway. The room wasn't empty. A patient had just been wheeled in an hour earlier from the ER and nobody had updated the board yet. He coded less than 20 minutes later, and the crash team made it in time only because Beth happened to already be standing outside his door. Nobody on staff has been able to explain how the board knew a room number that wasn't even in the system yet, and the break room board was quietly thrown away not long after. The boy at the tree line. 2 camp counselors in the Adirondacks used a homemade Ouija board with their cabin of kids fast asleep just to pass the last hour of their shift. One counselor, Todd, asked if there was anyone else awake in the camp right now who shouldn't be. The planchette spelled out a name, and Todd immediately recognized it as a boy who wasn't in his cabin. He walked the perimeter with a flashlight and found that same boy standing alone at the edge of the tree line, wide awake, staring into the woods, with no memory afterward of leaving his bunk or how he got there. The boy's parents were called the next morning and pulled him from camp early. Todd never got a straight answer for how the board knew the boy was already outside before anyone had checked. Leave this motel. A traveling salesman named Kurt kept a Ouija board in his motel room for a week straight, using it alone each night out of boredom between towns and long drives. On the 4th night, he asked if he'd make his next sales quota. The planchette spelled out a date, 3 days sooner than his actual deadline, and then added one more word: leave. Kurt laughed it off and stayed anyway, figuring it was just his own hand moving the planchette without realizing it. 2 nights later, a fire broke out in the room directly next to his, forcing the entire floor to evacuate at 2 a.m. in the freezing cold. Firefighters later confirmed the blaze started from faulty wiring behind the wall he shared with that room, the exact wall his bed was pushed against. Kurt made his quota early after all, from a hotel 3 towns over, and has never checked into a motel with a board left behind in the drawer since. The name nobody recognized. At a bachelorette party in Savannah, 6 women passed a Ouija board around a rented house just after midnight, mostly drunk and mostly laughing at each answer. One of them, half joking, asked the board to name the next person in the room who'd get married. It spelled out a name that belonged to nobody at the party, and nobody could place it no matter how long they sat there guessing. Everyone shrugged it off until the bride's younger sister, who'd stayed home sick that weekend, called the next morning to announce her engagement to a man with that exact name, someone none of the women at the party had ever met or even heard mentioned before that night. Nobody at that party has touched a board since, half out of fear and half out of simply not wanting to know what else it might get right. It's getting closer. The last story comes from 2 brothers in rural Pennsylvania who used a Ouija board alone in their basement, mostly out of boredom on a snow day. They asked simple questions at first. Then one of them, half joking, asked if anything was down there with them right now. The planchette spelled out yes, and then, unprompted, it spelled out closer. Both boys said the temperature in the room dropped noticeably within seconds, enough that they could see their breath, even though the rest of the house stayed completely normal. They dropped the planchette and ran upstairs without saying a word to each other. When their parents checked the thermostat in the basement later that night, everything read completely normal. No explanation for the cold either of them had felt. 10 boards. 10 nights that started as a game and ended as something nobody in the room could explain. Whatever you believe about Ouija boards, all 10 of these families and friend groups have one thing in common. Not one of them has touched a board since.